I train thousands of small businesses in the federal market, and I've determined the number one cause or the number one challenge for their success. And I want to share that with you, and I want to talk to you about it today. Most small businesses are not succeeding at the levels they want, at the levels you want, because they're not starting, and maybe this is you, right? Not starting and building enough strategic relationships. And when we talk about step-by-step guide for calling federal buyers, that's the beginning part to creating any relationship, in particular strategic relationships. And so if you learn this one skill and begin to get really good at it, you're going to start having more strategic relationships. And because of that, it's going to lead right to you having more success. We want you to achieve the success that you have in mind for yourself. It requires process. That's what we're here to teach you about today. So in today's training, I'm going to walk you through the four major process steps that are involved with calling federal buyers, right? When you think about calling federal buyers. So for success in calling federal buyers, you're going to want to follow these four process steps. So do me a favor, in the chat, put federal success in there. If you want to learn how to get in the buyer's doors by following these processes, I'm going to teach you today. So engage on the chat for me by putting federal success and let me know you want federal success. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my daily LinkedIn Live federal sales training where I teach tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. Last year, we did over 180 of these trainings. They were watched over 500 million times. And I want you to know that I'm live every single day, weekday, right? Every single weekday from 12 to 12:30 East Coast time. So come join us live, or if you need to watch the replay, those are freely available. Before we get started, I just want to ask you to help buyers remember who you are. Put your company name into the chat if you haven't done this yet. Put your core competency, 2 or 3 words that describe your core competency. Actually, if you also have a designation like woman-owned, hub-zone, service-disabled veteran, or hub-zone, I don't know if I said that, service-disabled woman, 8A. It's Friday. I'm a little tired. But put those 4. If you're one of those 4, put that in and let us know, as well as SB for small business. But put that in so people know about your company. And as you grow your network, definitely engage on the chat and in this community so that you can meet with other people. I want to make sure you realize that we're not just training, we're building this community for you, that you can come here and meet new people, hear what they do, right? That's why I have you put the core competency in, and then you can take your relationships offline and begin to develop them. So you're not just trying to develop relationships with buyers, but also with teammates. And sometimes those are, 2 cybersecurity firms getting together and maybe we can help each other. But sometimes it's construction and cyber, and you're just going after the same target agency, or you're both in the same city. We're all following the same journey. So build your connections and develop your relationships in the chat. All right, we're going to go through a fire hose of information. In fact, speaking of fire hose. By the way, I'm going to get into the step-by-step guide for calling federal buyers, the meat of today's training. But really quick thing, if you know people who might be interested in this, tag them in the chat. You can just put at, Neil McDonald, for example, and my name will come up if you're on LinkedIn, and you can be tagged. Tag your colleagues, tag your friends. If all of us are doing that, we're building the community up bigger for each other. So, okay, let me get started with the first step in the process for calling federal buyers to have success calling federal buyers, right? It's research. So before you begin anything with a federal buyer, before you start reaching out, you want to research who they are. You want to understand more information about what they're trying to achieve, their goals or objectives, the challenges and pain points. These are fundamental to sales in the federal market. Really, it's fundamental to sales, right? You need to understand where your customer's at, what they're trying to do and where they're trying to go, as well as what challenges might be holding them back, right? This is why I share every morning. I don't know if you know this, but every morning I share on LinkedIn a strategic plan from a different agency so that you can get access to it. And I summarize the information that's in there. I read through and I try to find out the big nuggets and put them into the LinkedIn post, but I share the PDF so that you can do your research. This morning, I think it was the Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency, something like that. Somebody will put it into the chat for me. But that information is hugely valuable, but it's also very helpful as you start to research a customer or somebody you want to reach out to. and begin to talk to them, right? One of the things we say often in sales is that people don't care what you know until they know that you care, right? People don't care what you know until they know that you care. And one of the ways that you can show that you care is by researching them before you go to try to have a meeting. Certainly before you even have a meeting, but before you even try to reach out to them, you might sit there and just do some basic research. I'm not talking about hours, right? Sometimes in the beginning, you just want to do a cursory review so you know you're calling the right people and you can tie it back to something on their website or in the strategic plans, et cetera. But it's really important that as you're thinking about reaching out to people, you want to make sure that you've got it in mind that I want to show them that I care. And I want to take the time to understand their challenges and their goals, right? So one of the big, huge advantages of research is this ability and huge advantage as it relates to you being able to make phone calls, right? Because often we feel anxious trying to make a call. I ran into this challenge myself in the military, right? And I try to use this to equate it to sales. When you're making sales calls, sometimes you're going to be anxious. I've been doing this for 20, 30 years as a sales guy. I'm still anxious if I'm going to call somebody. I'm able to get past that anxiety or that fear. I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to call them. And the more prepared I am, the better that call is going to go. But it doesn't mean my anxiety goes away. I'll tell you about when I was in the Army, right? I was in the Army and I was in this unit called the Rangers. And when we used to jump out of airplanes, sometimes I think when people hear me say I used to jump out of airplanes, they think of this pleasant James Bond type. You jump out of a plane, you're it's funny, it's skydiving, but you're just kind of coming down and you're having fun. If you've watched a movie called Point Break, it's a bunch of friends out there having fun, just falling, it's kind of thing. That's not what it's like when you jump out of a plane in the military for the average airborne person. When they jump out of a plane, when I jump out of a plane, I am absolutely afraid. I still do it, right? But the whole time I'm walking up, I've got this fear factor because I know what it's going to be like. And sometimes it's going to be pleasant and sometimes it's not. But when I jump out of a plane, it's usually moving, 400 miles an hour. And when you jump out of a plane, the wind hits you. And imagine getting punched in the face, but this is a full body blast of that. And you're flipping around in the air. And in your head, you've got it in your mind that if your parachute doesn't open in 4 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4. If your parachute doesn't open in 4 seconds, you're in trouble. And you've got a reserve right here on your belly, and you can pull that. But 12 seconds from the minute I leave the plane to the minute I hit the ground, right? There's a lot of anxiety there. And think about it as it relates to making a phone call. I could call somebody and they could say no. They could say, why are you calling me? They could not answer the phone. There's all sorts of things that can happen when you do cold calls to the government. But one thing that is never going to be part of your anxiety is death. You don't have to worry about dying when you make a phone call. You don't have to worry about getting physically hurt when you make a phone call, right? You might get a little emotionally hurt, but that's all right. You have friends for that, right? So when you do research, it helps you get past some of that anxiety because it gives you this self-confidence that you're going to be able to make the call. When I jumped out of airplanes, I followed the process. I tucked it tight. I jumped perfectly, right? I did exactly what I was trained because they taught me a skill. And every one of my jumps after my second one, which was an idiot jump, but every one of my jumps after that was perfect. Always textbook, always worked, chute always opened. And it's the same thing with when you're going to make phone calls to federal buyers. If you look at this as a skill and you develop the skill and you understand that research is part of that skill, then when you jump out of that plane and pick up the phone, right? When you pick up that phone and call the buyer, you're going to have self-confidence that comes from knowing their challenges. Hey, I was reading your strategic document and I just had 2 questions about goal number 5 and goal number 6 or something. You instantly are going to shift authority because they're going to go, goal 5 and 6, man, I haven't even read my strategic plan or something. But what you're showing them is you cared enough before calling them to even realize that they had a strategic plan. So it's really important to your success in federal sales calling to do that research. So that's the first step. Put research into the chat if you understand what I'm talking about. Russ, if the planes were perfectly good, I wouldn't be jumping out of them. Anyway, so, why is a tube of metal up in the air? That's just crazy. Jumping out of it and getting back to the ground, that's not crazy. Okay, sidebar, but put research into the chat if you understand what I'm saying there. And I'm going to move on to the second tip, which is targeting. So the first thing you do is research, some basic research to understand the customer, let them know you care. Second thing you're going to do is target. You're going to identify, I want to get into a Department of Veterans Affairs. Let's use that as my example today. The benefit of targeting is that you're going to know exactly who to call, and you're going to realize based on your research that you're calling people who that research will resonate with. They will get that you're trying to align their strategies to their needs, right? And that's the whole point. So targeting is a really straightforward exercise. This stuff I'm teaching you, by the way, is exactly what we teach in our Business Accelerator workshop, or when I release a business development course. This is what we teach on the 7-step process for success: research, targeting, outreach, right? I'm going to add one in for just today on cold calling, but targeting is about finding the right people's names, numbers, and emails. And so you might look for small business specialists, you might look for contracting officers, or you might look for program office personnel. And yesterday, I think I did a whole training on that, so you can find that. But this idea of finding the right people is the second step. Not a lot to talk about there, but when you do it, you'll have a list of people you know exactly who to call. So when you start picking up the phone, you don't have to stress about that anymore, because sometimes it's not just stressing about what they say when I call them, but sometimes I'm stressing about, who do I call? Take the time to do your targeting, and targeting is complete. I've got a whole training separate on targeting, but targeting is complete when you have a list of 100 to 200 people's names. And just to give you a perspective of how doable this is, we have a customer in our workshop that is going after a large prime. We were able to help them build a list of 1 to 200 people in that large prime alone, to begin to knock on doors and say, hey, we've been working with you and we're great and you love us, but we haven't met you yet, right? And so in one particular company, this is a large prime, obviously, so you can do that same thing in an agency. You can find 100 people if you take the time to do that. If that makes sense, put targeting into the chat. So you do research, then you do targeting. Put targeting into the chat. Okay, so let me move on to the third step. And this is a little sideways from the 7-step process. Just in case I got people on here who haven't seen this before, the 7-step process that I'm talking about is this one. This is the 7-step process for federal revenue success that we've created. Research leads to targeting, leads to outreach. When you've done that, you can start building relationships. And when you have good relationships, strategic relationships, you'll get opportunities in your pipeline. You'll hear about them that lead to proposals, lead to sales, right? Very quick way of talking about the 7-step process. But so we just talked about research and targeting. I am going to talk about outreach, but before there, I want to just put an activity in the middle there between targeting and outreach, specifically as it relates to some of the anxiety we might feel about calls and how to warm them up. So the third step I want to talk to you about today's 4-step process here is engaging. So before you outreach to somebody, I want you to engage with them. People buy from those they know, like, and trust. You may have heard this before, right? People buy from those they know, like, and trust. When you engage with people on LinkedIn or wherever, you're going to begin to start that process. Knowing is just about, oh, that's Neil. I seen him on LinkedIn, or he shared the strategic plan. I got people in the community. I have those of you who are here for the first time, but I'm seeing you engage in the chat. I don't see it as much at the moment, but I'll come back afterwards and I'll look. And Gus and I, when we do the after action review for trainings, we look and we're like, oh, that's a new name. Let's say hi. Let's do whatever. Not that we don't say hi to Russ, who's been here forever, right? But we say hi to the new people as well. But that's the knowing part of know, like, and trust. And as you move forward, depending on how you're engaging, you will increase the trust factor. Like tends to come once you have the relationship, but you can begin the knowing and the trusting part early on. These are marketing touch points, right? I've described it before as you have to engage with somebody. We call it a marketing engagement, a marketing touch, basically them seeing you 20 to 60 times, right? And you can put any number in there that you want, but you have to engage with them a lot before it begins to sink in who you are, before they begin to even know you, right? Keep coming back. It's like, oh, this is the cybersecurity company or something. So those marketing points happen when you're doing the engagement. And then the last thing is, as part of engagement, is it reduces the risk. And I really want to point this out, right? When you engage with people before you call them, you're reducing the risk to the buyer, to that person you're trying to call. When you call anybody, you want to be able to show them that you can reduce the risk or increase the value. And it's the value part can come from what you're engaging with and sharing, but the risk part is maybe you call a buyer and they go, well, who is this calling me? I don't know who this is. And that's fine. I do cold calls all the time. And so you can do those and you drive past that, but you can minimize the amount of cold calls you do by engaging on LinkedIn in particular. But you can also engage at matchmaking events or industry days or whatever. But engaging with them reduces that perceived risk because they're like, oh, I saw them here, I saw them there, I saw them there. They're at least real, right? I remember the first time I met, I met this guy, Kit, who was working for Greg, who's a customer of ours, but been a friend for 2-3 years now, 4 or 5 years. When I started the GovCon Chamber back in 2018, it was under a different name, but I was speaking at Department of Energy, and it's like a couple hundred people there, and I was speaking at this event. And when I sat down at this main table, this guy in front turns around, he goes, "Oh my God, you're real!" And he had been watching me. Him and his colleagues been watching me on the internet. They were, they're like, "Oh, who is this guy?" And I was newer on the scene as a, let's call it a coach or whatever, because I was a small business owner before. But he turned around and said, "You're real." And that's when we've really been pushing this whole idea of, well, how do you keep increasing the reality that you're real, right? And this is the knowing. And that's why I want you to engage. And when you help people know who you are before you even call them, the risk to them of answering your call is much lower. Their guard is much lowered. And so keep that in mind. Put engaging into the chat. If you're following with what I'm saying, that engaging people before you call them is a way to start the process of knowing, liking, and trusting you. So put engaging into the chat. If you find me engaging, put engaging into the chat. I'm in a silly mood today. Okay, so let's move on to the fourth one because I've got just 11 minutes left. The fourth one here is outreach. I already mentioned it. So we do research, targeting, engaging, and now you do an outreach, right? And so this is the step-by-step approach for calling federal buyers is do research, targeting, engaging, and then outreach. And so in outreach, fundamentally, outreach is just picking up the phone and calling people, right? And I'm going to talk to you about the exact step-by-step process, and I'll show you in a second a 30-day process for that if they don't answer on the first call. But I want to give you 2 examples of how this really just works. It's straightforward. The first, and both these examples are from within the last week. I could give you examples over the last 5 years, how it works constantly, but just 2 examples from this past week. So we've got a customer who's in our Business Development Accelerator workshop, our BD Accelerator workshop, and they're reaching into the VA. They're trying to go from a different set of agencies into the VA for the first time. So they're breaking into the VA, and they need to start and build relationships in there so they can get traction, right? We did targeting with them, and in one activity that they did, they called 30 people at the VA, and within a week, they got 8 of those people calling them back to coordinate with them, right? One of those people who called back was your very highest goal you could have had. If you said, hey, if we reach in there, this would be good, this would be good, this would just be unbelievable. It'd be like a gold medal at the Olympics. That type of person called back from the calls. And I haven't even told you like the rest of the example in the process, and I'm not going to, but just 30 calls. They just picked up the phone, 30 voicemails, and 8 people called back. Most people aren't going to answer your phone. It's actually one of my favorite reasons for picking up the phone is because you can leave a message that they will listen to in their own time. And you've got a script and you read it off. It's perfect message, right? And then I follow up with an email. We'll talk about that in a second, but I'm not even talking about following up to the email. So 8 of those people responded to the call. And then the process is you follow up with an email a couple hours later saying, hey, I left a voicemail, just wanted to touch base, trying to schedule an intro call. More of those 30 people will definitely respond. Maybe not all of them. I talk about this all the time. Some will, some won't. So what? So that was one story. Second story I want to talk about is somebody who just messaged me this morning, which made my day, and I had to share it with my team. But someone who's been taking my training, right? And they just told me that they had followed the process. And by following the process, not only were they able to target a relationship they wanted to start, reach out to that person, but through that activity have gotten 2 clients from it. So when I teach you the process, I'm teaching you about how to get in and have a meeting. This person took it to the next level where they got business out of it, right? But that is the ultimate goal, is to get revenue or in business and clients out of it. But it all comes from this process. And she had just did what I said, this process. And so I'm going to show you really quick. Let me just share my screen. I want to show you this 30-day process and that we tell people on how to follow. And by the way, if you want a copy of this handout, just put 30-day process handout, please, into the chat. 30-day process handout, please, in the chat. So this process here lays out what to do over a 30-day period. This handout was created to help people who had the challenge with folks are not answering their call, right? I called it, what do you do when you have elusive federal buyers, right? That's fine. Some people are going to get back, some are not. So there's a couple of things I want to share here with you. And so let me just zoom in a little bit. So the first thing, you can read a little bit on the right, but I really want to talk to you about you can read on the left, but I want to talk about the right. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing outreach and you're doing calls, right, is that I say some will, some won't. So what? It's because of certain reasons. So think about your buyer. You're calling them. They've got a lot of business reasons to distract them. They've got to go into meetings. They've got a whole bunch of smalls reaching out to them. So if somebody's not getting back to you, right, it's not personal. They might be dealing with personal issues, right? At the beginning of this, I did a shout out to a friend who's on the mend, right, and getting better. Well, that means she's not at work, right? So it has nothing to do with you. She's not responding to your emails or phone calls for any other reason except for she's healing, right? And so it's the same thing with people at your buyer location. If they don't get back to you, don't take it personal. Just assume that they have good intentions. I always say the answer is yes until you tell me no. Well, what if they didn't even respond to you? Well, then it's yes. If it was no, you would have told me. That's sales. You have to have that confidence, or at least you have to begin to give yourself that confidence. And maybe you just put it up on the wall. If it's not no, it's yes. There's no maybes. If it's not no, it's yes. No is solid. Yes is in a path. So one other thing here, as you do calls, right, be patient, be persistent, be professional, be kind, be courteous. I'm going to give you this handout, but keep those things in mind, because when somebody calls you, that's exactly what you want from them, right? So this process, you can see it here on day one, what I talk about, and when I use that VA example, what I'm saying is we did this initial voicemail, or our customer did, right? Initial voicemail, and got people responding to it. What I say is then a few hours later, not right away, but a few hours later, stagger it, follow up with an email that says, I'm just following up to the voicemail I left. I'd love to schedule an intro call, right? I put together scripts and things like that for it. And then as you move forward, you can see I stagger it back and forth between email, voicemail. The real reason I put this thing together, and let me zoom out page level just so you kind of see it for a second. The real reason I put this together was because I had people telling me that they were following up to customers. I said, well, how often? Every couple of weeks. I'm like, no. If you're following up anything more than a few days, they've forgotten who you are and you're starting the relationship all again, right? They're going to go, oh, who, what? But if you keep it consistent, like I have this, every couple of days you're reaching out and you're twice a week, sometimes three times a week maybe, but twice a week at least, you're reaching out to them and you're just touching base with them, letting them know that you're really committed to building a relationship with them, right? So that's really important for you to be able to do as you go out there. If you want that handout, put it in there, just 30-day follow-up handout, and I'll get that to you. So as we go forward, I just want to give you one last tip as we wrap up today's training, right? Today's training, we talked about research, targeting, engaging, and outreach. The one tip for you as you move forward is call one person today. Begin to engage them and put them on that 30-day process. Like follow through the 30-day step and watch how they come back either with a no, which is totally okay, or with a, hey, sorry it took me so long to get back to you. I've been busy, but let's get you on the calendar, right? Don't let it be no just because someone's not responding. So that's my tip, is call one person today. If you'd like to work with us, like our customers, and you'd like to learn more about our BD Accelerator workshop, do me a favor, shoot me a message in LinkedIn and we can get back to you. This workshop is designed for companies that are at a certain stage, $1 million plus usually of revenue coming in, so that we can take you to the next level. By the way, if you found today's training valuable, do me a favor, throw thanks in the chat. I hope you have a great weekend, and I want you to remember, government contracting, it is not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.